10, 13 years old. Everybody.
I am so serious.
To hold on to something and thereby make it overflow, this is not worthwhile. To make use of something and still keep it sharp, this cannot be sustained for long. A palace full of gold and diamonds nobody can protect. To be rich, entitled, and arrogant into the bargain, this in itself attracts misfortune. Hold on to something and thereby make it overflow. Palace full of gold and diamonds nobody can protect. To be rich, entitled, and arrogant into the bargain, this in itself attracts misfortune. When the work is done, it is time to withdraw. This is the Tao of heaven.
But what happened was that this being blasphemy for the Jews, it became blasphemy for the Christians, for anyone else than Jesus to say it. They said, okay, baby, it was so with you, but there it stops. No more of this business. And as a result of that, Jesus was made irrelevant by pedestalization, by being kicked upstairs. Oh, wow. In spite of the fact that he said, greater works than these that I do shall you do. Oh no, upstairs with you, baby, because we just can't have that sort of thing going on in a monarchical universe. We're not going to have democracy in the kingdom of heaven. So, this is why the gospel is impossible, because we are supposed to follow the example of Christ, where he says, for example, be not anxious for the morrow. Do not worry about what you shall eat, what you shall drink, and what you shall wear. God will take care of you. Doesn't he take care of the birds? Don't the flowers grow? And they're wonderful. They're crazy. They're great. What are you worrying about? I've never heard a sermon preached on that. Never. Because it's totally subversive. The economy would crash. So they say, oh, yes, that's all very well, but he was the boss's son. See, he had that colossal advantage. Take up your cross and follow him. Hey, but wait a minute. I don't know I'm going to be resurrected 3 days later. I can't do all those miracles. He had an unfair advantage. So how can you ask us to follow the example of Christ? But supposing he didn't have an unfair advantage.
Can you educate your soul so that it encompasses the one without dispersing itself? Can you make your strength unitary and achieve that softness that makes you like a little child? Can you cleanse your secret seeing so that it becomes free of stain?
Can you? supposing that what was true about Jesus as a Son of God is true of us. Only a few of us know it. And we are pretty careful to be quiet about it, lest the same thing happen to us as happened to Jesus. And indeed it often does. And you get these people from Arkansas or Texas or anywhere in the Bible Belt who never heard of the Upanishads. And they have this cosmic consciousness experience. And they realize that that's what happened to Jesus. And they say, I'm Jesus, come back. Well, everybody says to them, you aren't Jesus. It's pretty obvious you're not Jesus. You're just Joe Dogs. Well, he says that's what they said about Jesus. He has a perfect argument, except they say you're not much of a Jesus. They say, all right, if you're Jesus, command that these stones be made bread. And he says, a wicked and deceitful generation seeketh for a sign, and there shall no sign be given. Now,
can you educate your soul so that it encompasses the one without dispersing itself? Can you make your strength unitary and achieve that softness that makes you like a little child? Can you cleanse your secret seeing so that it becomes free? Can you educate your soul so that it...
Can you cleanse your secret seeing so that it becomes free of stain? Can you love men and rule the state so that you remain without knowledge? Can you, when the gates of heaven open and close, be like the female bird? Can you penetrate everything with your inner clarity and purity without having need for action?
Is it interesting? Is it important for the human being to realize that in some sense of the word, whatever it means, he is God or one with God? As is plainly taught by the Hindus, hinted at by the Buddhists, only they don't like to put it out as a concept, in case people will use the concept as an idol to hang on to. They want you to find out for yourself and not believe in it. And certainly the Taoists understand it, the Sufis understand it, a lot of people understand it. But so what? Well, the importance of it is this, that to know that you are God is another way of saying that you feel completely with this universe. You feel profoundly rooted in it and connected with it. You feel, in other words, that the whole energy which expresses itself in the galaxy.
Can you, when the gates of heaven open and close, be like the female bird? Can you penetrate everything with your inner clarity and purity without having need for action, generating and nourishing, generating and not possessing, being effective and not retaining, increasing and not dominating? This is the secret of life.
Can you, when the gates of heaven...
is intimate. It is not something to which you are a stranger, but it is that with which you, whatever that is, are intimately bound up. That in your seeing, your hearing, your talking, your thinking, your moving, you express that which it is which moves the sun and other stars. And if you don't know that, if you don't feel that, well, naturally you feel alien, you feel a stranger in the world, and if you feel a stranger, you feel hostile. And therefore, you start to bulldoze things about, to beat it up, and to try and make the world submit to your will, and you become a real troublemaker. So I feel also one reason why you become hostile is that feeling that you were just brought into this place, that your father and mother went up to some monkey business that they probably shouldn't have done, or it was bad rubber goods, and as a result of this, here you are, and you didn't ask to be here. Well, you always feel you can turn around and blame them. You can blame somebody. You can blame the government. You can blame the rascals. You can blame the cheaters. Always supposing you yourself aren't a rascal, which is long odds. You always can blame someone and say, I didn't ask for it. Take it away. And yet, very few people are all too ready to take it away. Camus said that the only serious philosophical problem is whether or not to commit suicide. And if you don't say take it away, what are you going to do? You've really got to assume responsibility for it. You've got to say yes to what happens. It's my karma. And that doesn't mean merely, there are many misinterpretations of the doctrine of karma. It's usually and popularly understood that what happens to you, either fortunate or unfortunate, is the result of good or bad deeds in a previous life. Well, that's popular superstition. The real meaning of karma, the word in Sanskrit means simply doing. And if I say of an event it is your karma, it is saying it is your doing. So the exposition, a book which would expound karma, would be not so much a whodunit as a youdunit. But that seems fantastic. Now, therefore, what I propose we do is that we, instead of just ideologizing, we have a clinical experience. You know, in psychiatric school, in medical school, it's very usual for a doctor to bring a patient out in front of the students and talk with the patient as a kind of demonstration. He says, I want you to recognize the difference between a psychopath and a manic depressive or a schizophrenic or something. They don't know what all these things mean. And especially the schizophrenia. And so he has a dialogue with the patient right there. So let us suppose that I'm the patient, and you are the students and the doctors. And I suffer from what you would call the delusion that I'm God. And therefore, you might want to do something about me, or with me, or humor me, or ask me questions. And so I'm perfectly willing to submit to your examination and your treatment, and invite you to help yourselves.
Now, when did you become God?
Now?
Will you marry me?
No. Yes.
God, you sleep on your stomach or your back?
Sleeping is like politics. One sleeps on the right side, and then when you're tired of that, you sleep on the left. When you're tired of that, you sleep on your back. And when you're tired of that, you sleep on your stomach. And it is thus that the world goes round.
If you were God now, what were you yesterday?
Now,
How do you become God?
you don't become God.
Am I also God?
Yes.
Are we then the same person?
No.
What is
Remember, 3 persons, but 1 God.
God, could you tell us a little about Satan?
Could I tell you a little bit about Satan? Yes. Although the matter is a little esoteric, but I told you all about it in the book of Job, where you will see that in the court of heaven, Satan is the district attorney. He is not, as Christians imagine, the enemy of heaven and the enemy of mankind. He's merely the person who sees the bad side of things and carries out the dirty work. And therefore, he saw Job and wondered whether Job really was as great a guy as he seemed to be, and suggested that God should appoint a committee of investigation to find out. And the committee did its work very thoroughly, but the case went against Satan, because it was proved in the end that Job was an honorable man. Now, you notice that although we pay the salary of the district attorney, whenever there's a great criminal case before the public eye, people begin to take the side of the underdog. And the prosecutor always has less public sympathy than the defense, except in political trials. On the right hand of God, and you know the defense is always on the right hand of the judge in court, is our only mediator and advocate, which is a phrase referring to Jesus Christ our Lord. So there is the defense and there is the prosecution. And it is the function of Satan to be the prosecutor. There's a good deal more to it than that, because before all this started, as in a stage play, there was an arrangement in the green room before coming on stage in which certain things were understood, but that are only to be revealed when the curtain goes down at the end of the play.
Is Job God too?
Yes, but he doesn't know it.
God, why do you hide from the sight of so many?
Why do you hide? It's for the same reason you're hiding.
God mediated
Yes.
God?
Who else? What? Man has free will to the extent that he knows who he is. Not otherwise.
Where did you get the rule from?
Where I got it from.
People who ask women have free will too?
Yes. To the extent that she knows who she is, yes.
Can you penetrate everything with your inner clarity and purity without having need for action, generating and nourishing, generating and not possessing, being effective and not retaining, increasing and not dominating? This is the secret of life.
If man has free will, to know just what he is, and man is God, then you'd say that you are no more than any God in this room, or any man.
That is correct. I'm no more God than any of you.
Then you only have the power to know who you are.
Well, that is saying quite a bit, yes.
What is not God?
What is not God? There is nothing that is not God.
How do you learn who you are?
It's like waking up from a dream. After a while, one's experience
30 spokes around the hub, in the nothingness consists the carriage's effectiveness. One hollows the clay and shapes it into parts. In its nothingness consists the parts' effectiveness. One cuts out doors and windows to make the chamber.
begins to have what I would call a haven't we been here before feeling. Going round and round and round. And then you begin wondering, where am I going? And to answer that question, you have to try and find out what you want. And so I went into that very thoroughly. What do I want to happen? And, of course, as soon as you ask yourself that, you begin to fantasize. And our amazing technology is, of course, an expression of human desire for power, for what we want to achieve. So I simply set myself to thinking through how far we could go. And so I soon found myself at a great push-button place where I had a fantastic mechanism with buttons available for every conceivable thing I could wish. So I spent quite a bit of time playing with those. And science fiction wasn't in it. You know, you go going like that, and here is Cleopatra. And so on, you know, and then press this button, symphonic music in 4-channel sound, 16-channel sound, anything, you know, all possible pleasures are available. And when, you know, you're like everybody's dream of the Sultan in the palace, you suddenly notice there's a...
Therefore, what exists serves for possession, what does not exist serves for effectiveness. The 5 colors blind men's eyes, the 5 tones deafen men's ears, the 5 flavors spoil men's palates. Running and chasing make men's hearts mad. Rare goods confuse men's ways. Therefore the man of calling works for the body's needs, not for the eyes. He removes the other and takes this.
Button labeled surprise. You push that, and here we are.
Make men.
Yes, boredom is, of course, the problem. Boredom is the other side of creativity. And the energy of creation has that is the yang, the yin side of that energy is called boredom. Everything, of course, is fundamentally yang and yin. If you understand that, you really don't need to understand anything else.
As God, what responsibility do you feel to ameliorate evil in the world?
As God, what responsibility do I feel to ameliorate evil in the world? I begin with the point that I am responsible for the way the world is. If I couldn't feel that, I'd have to blame somebody else. I'm not willing to do that, because I know that under various changing circumstances, it might be appropriate for me to be as big a rascal as rascals have been. Now, as to improving the world is always improving. It may look to some people slow, but it's improving even when it is declining, because the world works in an undulatory process, like a wave.
Therefore the man of calling works for the body's needs, not for the eyes. He removes the other and takes this. Grace is as shameful as a fright. Honor is a great evil like the persona. What does this mean? Grace is as shameful as a fright. Grace is something inferior. One attains it and one is as if frightened. This is what is meant by grace is as shameful as fright. What does this mean? Honor is a great evil like the persona. The reason I experience great evil is that I have a persona.
Grace is something inferior.
It goes up and it goes down. It goes up and it goes down. And it couldn't go up all the time, because if it did, we wouldn't know that that was up. So it goes down some of the time so that we can know when it goes up, because if we didn't know when it went up, it would be like being in a space where everything was light. There'd be nothing to write home about. There would be no black marks on the space, and so it would be like a piece of perfectly empty paper. Similarly, to be in a completely black space would also be a kind of unconsciousness with nothing to write home about, because there'd be nothing would make any difference. So therefore, if you're going to have black, you won't know that it's black unless you have some white, and if you're going to have white, you won't know that it's white unless you have some black.
Why do you think we're supposed to love one another? Because if we get to that point, there won't be any of these ups and downs. We'll have to tell you.
Correct, but that's not a teaching, it's a koan. A koan. A koan is a Japanese word for a spiritual problem used in Zen Buddhism, such as, what is the sound of one hand?
Therefore the man of calling works for the body's needs, not for the eyes. He removes the other and takes this. Grace is as shameful as a fright. Honor is a great evil like the persona. What does this
Welcome to Deloitte Tech Talk.
Sing make men's hearts mad, rare goods confuse men's ways. Therefore the man of calling works for the body's needs, not for the eyes. He removes the other and takes this. Sing make men's hearts mad.
And these problems are given to those who ask questions concerning their spiritual development. And sometimes, as St. Paul,
What does this mean? Honor is a great evil like the persona. The reason I experience great evil is that I have a persona. If I have no persona, what evil could I experience? What does this mean? Therefore, whosoever honors the world in his persona, to him one may entrust the world. Whosoever loves this world in his persona, to him one may hand over the world. One looks for it and does not see it, its name is seed. One listens for it and does not hear it, its name is subtle.
Or whosoever honors the world.
pointed out, commandments are given not in the expectation that they will be obeyed, but in the expectation that they will reveal something to those who hear them. That was St. Paul's comment on the whole Mosaic law. Yes, sir.
If we accept the reason.
What?
If we accept the kind of procedure that we are all God,
Yes.
one of the hereafter. That's what. Is there a heaven? Is there a purgatory? Is there a hell?
The hereafter is, of course, now. Because if you will examine it closely, there is no when else than now. And if you want to make hell of it, you can make hell of it. If you want to make heaven of it, you can make heaven of it. Purgatory, purgatory. It's all here. Always was, always will be. What is death? Death is an undulation in consciousness. How would you know you were alive unless you'd once been dead? Yes.
You realize the same way that Jesus could kill God, why was it
unnecessary for him to have material possessions and necessary for you?
It wasn't unnecessary for him to have material possessions. They said of St. John the Baptist that he was an ascetic, but of Jesus, this man consorts with gluttoners and wine-bibbers and comes eating and drinking. And when the lady Mary poured precious ointment on his feet and anointed him, they said the same thing that the members of the vestry say to the minister today. Why this great expense? Couldn't it all have been sold for much money and given to the poor?
It's a problem.
It is a problem, sure.
Whosoever honors the world in his persona, to him one may entrust the world. Whosoever loves this world in his persona, to him one may hand over the world. One looks for it and does not see it. Its name is seed.
You see, in many ways, when you get down to these very deep ethical problems, well, there sure is no easy decision one way or the other. You must look at the problem from the point of view of an artist. Which way of doing this is in some sense greater?
One looks for it and does not see it, its name is seed. One listens for it and does not hear it, its name is subtle. One reaches for it and does not feel it, its name is small. These three cannot be separated, therefore intermingled they form the one. Its highest is not light, its lowest is not dark, welling up without interruption. One cannot name it, it returns again to non-existence. This is called the formless form, the objectless image. This is called the darkly chaotic.
It may be better to go off with a bang than with a whimper. Let me see.
Are you not all the time? I mean, constant all the time.
There is no time, my dear. It's always now.
During every event, in space time. At every precise moment.
Yes, if you put it that way, of course.
You are consciously God as an experiencing unit on this plane of
Wait a moment, consciously, not necessarily, because that would spoil the fun. If you press button surprise, you'll press the button so that you forget who you are.
Right, so that you don't always know all the answers to a given problem.
Yes, that's perfectly true. This is called, in the Bible, kenosis. In St. Paul's epistle to the Philippians, he says, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, being in the form of God, thought not equality with God a thing to be grasped, but humbled himself, and made himself of no reputation, and was found in fashion as a man, and became obedient to death." And so you get from this the kenotic theory of creation, held by some of the Greek fathers, that the creation of the universe is the self-emptying or self-forgetting of the Godhead. Yes, I think it's your turn now.
How does your concept of the creation of evil, so that man could see how good is, differ from the old stories of a man beating his head against the wall so he could feel how good it is and stuff?
It's really rather like it. Because the universe is fundamentally a system which creeps up on itself and then says, "Boo." And then it laughs at itself for jumping. And you see, every time it does it, it forgets that it did it before. So it never becomes a bore. Yes, the lady in red.
Can you make yourself into a point of consciousness and travel around the cosmos, such as Dr. Lilly was speaking of last night in Talking About the Story?
Yes, but it isn't necessary to travel. The question is, can I make myself into a point of consciousness and travel around the cosmos and see things from all sorts of places? I say, yes, but it isn't necessary to travel. One is already there. In other words, I'm using your eyes where you are, like you're using mine. Just in the same way, my head is not my feet. It uses my feet. The head is very different from the feet. You couldn't possibly say the head and the feet are the same, but they are one organism.
They each have a soul.
Two.
What do you do about the words?
What do I do about boredom? Press button surprise.
Oh, it's always there.
Yes, always. Yes, the lady in purple here.
You talk about boredom. It seems to me, at least in my own case, and maybe many people, that one of the biggest problems in life is being forced to earn a living in something which is not what I would rather do. And I often wonder if the answer to move somewhere and live on less money and do the things that I would like to do, or must I resign myself, as many people have, to do the thing that gets me the bread, and then in my spare time, somehow try to make up for the many days and weeks and years of this kind of half living. What is the answer?
Well, there are two sort of answers, one of which you've already indicated, which is to do with less and do what you want.
Could be more.
Which,
But if everyone did that, you know, those things, the medical things that we sort of accepted as part of life, wouldn't get done.
I think the objection, if everyone did that, is rather like asking what would happen if everybody wanted to catch the 4 o'clock train from Grand Central to Westport. Or if all the molecules of air in this room were suddenly to congregate over in that corner. There is a bare chance that it might happen, but very low. Yes.
Would you say we're going around in circles trying to eliminate evil? Because we never will. There might not be any evil.
Yes.
We're eliminating, so we're just playing games.
We are going round in circles. But you see, going round in circles, as you may have observed by looking at the sky, is what the universe is doing. You see, before.
As long as we recognize one, we're all right.
Yes. Yes, that's the thing. It's a dance. And when you dance, you don't dance to get somewhere. Yes, all right, but you turn, when you wake up, you turn the confusion into a dance. And so I go back to your question. What is the alternative to clearing out of the job you're doing? And to say doing with less but having more fun? Well, there are ways of making almost any activity into a dance. Supposing you had to drive a bus in New York, which is a very harrowing job in the ordinary way, you must not take seriously anything about it. This is the first rule. That it doesn't matter a damn if you don't get there on time, but it would be fun to go as fast as is consistent with safety. And therefore, you swing that bus, and you play things with the horn. You take the whole thing lightly, as if it is not serious. And because this is the nature, say, in ritual, when you have a procession. Now, people who don't understand religion don't know how to make the right kind of processions. There are those who go a military march, and they don't understand it because their objective is to get there. There are those who dawdle like ducks, and they don't understand because they are trying to be dignified. On the other hand, there are those who walk as if they had already arrived. And this is the way kings walk. Because a king is the center, and he is always where it's at. Where it's at is where the king is by definition. So, if you work in this way, people who are practicing meditation take up monotonous things for fun. And meditation is supposed to be fun. I hope John Lilly told you that this morning. Well, you say you're going to do Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Om Mani Padme Om Mani Padme Om. You know, you can really have a gas doing that. And so that anything monotonous can be treated in the same way. This is one of the ways of overcoming boredom. Because boredom is the great problem for energy. See, energy is always on the go. Yes, sir. Yes, the gentleman in the white shirt here.
Does it bother you to be called mythic sometimes by people who are like the idea of your existence?
Mythic? No. Mythic is a great word. Then the question is, does it bother me to be called mythic? No. Myth is very powerful. Myth is fun. Myth is stories told to children. Everybody loves them. Yes, sir. What? Is God omniscient? Well, it depends what you mean by the word. A lot of people think that omniscience is like knowing everything that's in the Encyclopedia Britannica. That's not omniscience, that's intellectual elephantiasis. Now, you see, let me explain this question, because it's always important, and when anybody announces that he or she is God, people say at once, well, will you tell us in millimeters the height of Mont Blanc? When I say look it up in the encyclopedia, it's there. The thing is this. What we ordinarily call knowledge is the translation of life into words. And that is a very cumbersome process because If we had to translate the process into words every time we took a breath, we'd never get around to it. It takes so long to describe and think through the whole physiology of breath. Therefore, we do it without thinking about it. And I find that I'm shining the stars in just the same way. I mean, if you want it in words, it's going to take us a long time to get through them because words are strung out in a line.
Then I sense that eternally we are, and we are all gods. How come as a god, since you said that we are all gods, and therefore I am God, how come I find such difficulty in recognizing, understanding, or finding peace and tranquility within myself?
How do you, if you are God, how do you find such difficulty in finding peace and tranquility in yourself? That's because you're looking for it away from the place in which you are. You are seeking it apart from the experience which you have at this moment. And you are regarding that experience and saying, that's pretty lousy, I'd like something better than that. But the trouble with that is that it splits you in two pieces. And once you're split in two pieces, you're lost. Because you've made a difference between the experience you are now having, on the one hand, and yourself who is having it on the other. And you wish you could get away from that experience. Now, the truth of the matter is you can't, because you are what you experience. It's a myth, purely, that there is some sort of experiencer who has the experience. You are what you know, because it is not I know something, there is simply a process called the knowing. You could say the knowing, like the world, has two poles, north and south. And so the knowing ball has the knower and the known, but only in that sense. Now, knowing changes. It changes itself. But if you try to stand outside it and change it, it'll be like standing outside your hand and trying to move your hand from outside. And so comes the difficulty. In other words, this would be the difficulty for God in the press button surprise situation, where you think you want something different from what you have. But if you do think that, you've got to ask yourself the question, what it is that you really want. This is the most fundamentally important question. And you will find, if you go into it very, very deeply, that you have it. Now, you may change your mind about it, but you do have what you want.
God, if this place caught on fire, I would find myself so scared that I wonder if I would also feel that I was God, and if I am God and scared, what do I do about that?
Well, one of the ways of not being bored is to scare yourself.
Yes.
Don't we all go to the movies just to be scared? We put certain limits on it, indeed, before we go and say, well, this isn't really going to happen. It's only a play or a movie. And therefore, while we see the safe outline of the proscenium arch, in the back of our minds, as a sort of hintergedanke, we know it's only a play.
I'm talking about when it isn't only a play.
How do you know it isn't? If you see, after all, the task of the actor on the stage is to come on so well that the audience thinks it's real, so that he has them crying, so that he has them shaking with fear, so that he has them sitting on the edges of their chairs. Well, that's just one ordinary Joe Doakes actor, but supposing the actor of the play is the real big actor. Wow, that play would seem real. And so that's what happens when the house cat is on fire. Yes, lady in red. Yes, you're looking behind yourself. What is sleep? The seventh day. What? When is the seventh day? When you sleep. Yes.
Yes, God. The only reason I know that I'm God is because I take the responsibility for it.
Yes.
Does that answer the lady's question about the fire?
Oh, yes, that also would answer it, yes. It's a question of taking responsibility for what happens.
What happens if you don't do anything about the world?
If I don't do anything about the world?
The boredom.
The boredom.
What's through the boredom?
Well, that's another way. That's another way. You can explore boredom. You can bore into boredom. And watch it. Sometimes when you're bored, that's the only thing to do. Because even for God, you can't lift yourself up by your own bootstraps. Because that is by nature of the definition impossible.
You said that you would enjoy having a myth of you.
Yes, I think that would be fun. I mean, why else does one go on stage except to make myths? What? Excuse me, what did you say? What is my motivation for going on the stage? That is like asking, why is there a universe? Well, now, if you listened to George Leonard last night, George Leonard explained how children were befuddled by being taught to ask why about everything. Because you always look away from what you're asking about to its antecedents, and that won't lead you anywhere at all. Why am I here? And I answer that question. Then somebody says, well, why that? And then somebody says, well, why that? Why that? Why that? And you get back and back and back, and eventually you get tired of answering. And so fathers, when their children say, why, Daddy? Why? They say, oh, shut up and eat your lollipop. But what happens, you see, when we trace the causation of things into the past, it all begins to fade out in silence and no answer. Why? Because it didn't begin there. The universe begins now. It didn't begin in the past. And the past trails back from now like the wake of a ship.
If everything is God and there is no time except now, what is the role of chance?
If everything is God and there is no time except now, what is the role of chance? Chance pairs with order. We'll say randomness, we'll call it, and it pairs with order. And it is part of the nature of order. If you know what you mean by order, you know that you mean contrast with randomness. And if you know what you mean by randomness, you know that you mean contrast with order. So if you want to have order, you must have randomness, and vice versa. Yes?
Did you have this much charisma before you discovered your true nature?
Yes, but it came out in a different way. Yes.
I think there's a sort of danger here, though. The riddles are funny, and if you had time enough to think each one through, they'd be very profound. There's a certain danger of everything and everyone being God, because if you've really found yourself as God, then you know that certain things that you, as God, have created that don't personally affect you, you create for a reason, you stay out of them, and you go on a do-gooder. But if you think you're God, and then you try to go into too much social action and change the evils of this world, you end up hurting yourself and a lot of people, and you're playing God, and you're not really being God.
Well, I admit to you, my dear, that this is a very, very dangerous conversation. And that I thoroughly agree with, but we didn't come here, did we, to play it safe? All profound ideas and profound questions are dangerous. It is dangerous to go into science. As we all know too well, it is dangerous to go into medicine. Dangerous to go into writing, because the pen is often mightier than the sword. And so I don't think we should withdraw from certain things because they're dangerous. But I entirely agree with you that if I were, as it were, in the spirit of God to go about social reform, I would be failing to realize the construction of my own universe, which is that when you interfere with it, you've got to know exactly how you're interfering. Otherwise, the most amazingly unexpected things will happen. So when people ask for miracles, they don't realize what the miracles involve. I mean, if I turned the microphone into a rabbit, it's altogether possible that you might drop dead, because those events might be connected.
Did you ever study with Carl Jung?
Did I ever study with Carl Jung? I didn't study with him. I knew him, and I read a lot of his writings. Yes.
The notion of watching yourself, like watching your boredom or being aware of yourself, imply that there's a separation somewhere.
It does in a way, yes. And it depends how you're watching. There is a very interesting thing that comes up in this respect with regard to the Bhagavad Gita and to the Yoga Sutra, where they talk about the witness. There is, as it were, behind our ordinary self with its emotions and involvements, a witness self that does nothing more than perceive what happens. And this is the Atman, or the Purusha, which is not involved. And some of you, no doubt, especially in times of crisis, have suddenly discovered this sort of witness center behind everything that just isn't involved. Most terrible things can be going on, but the witness is impassive. Now, when we go into these states, we've got to be very careful of our descriptive language, because the descriptive language makes the witness seem something apart from what is happening in such a way that if we want to become really sort of skitsy and catatonic about things, we can always be withdrawn and go in and identify ourselves with a solitary and uninvolved witness, who is merely a hangout for the ego, as when the police raid a house in which there are burglars. And the burglars know they'll be caught if they're on the ground floor, so they go up to the first floor. So then the police come up to the first floor, they're up to the second, finally they get to the roof, the open sky and the infinite. And in this way, this was why the Buddha did not teach about the Atman, the real self within us, because he knew people would use the real self as a hideout for the ego. And so, when, say, Krishnamurti tries to explain this, he doesn't talk about the witness. He talks about awareness, and people say to him, but who is aware? What is aware? And he seems a little sticky in his answer here, because what is the matter is that the people asking the question are bewitched by grammar. They are using a language in which it is part of the grammatical convention that the verb always have a noun subject. Now, how on earth do verbs get started by nouns? I ask you. How can a thing start a process? Surely, this was really the same problem Descartes was wrestling with when he tried to find out how spirit could influence matter or how mind could influence body. Because everybody knows that all proper ghosts walk straight through walls without disturbing the bricks. So how can the ghost in the machine, as Kessler put it, the soul in the body, how can it do anything to the body? There's no connection. Two different realms. The point is, when we're talking about this awareness, what we call thought, feeling, sensation, emotion, we could say in a very clumsy way is it's aware of itself. It's the very nature. There wouldn't be sensation without awareness. You don't have to have something which is aware of it, any more than you have to have a thing called lightning, which does something called flashing. The flashing is the lightning. And so awareness is the one who's aware of it. I say this awareness, if I say I am aware, the word I, as William James suggested, is simply a word of position, like this or here. Awareness here.
Hi, Narges. I'm over here creating YouTube videos. Do you live in La Jolla? Because an angel came to me and said, I should date you, Narges, but that we should have babies and live in a $6 million mansion in La Jolla, sun tanning at the pool, sipping martinis at the moment. Destination unknown. Okay, I'm reading the Tao Te Ching, creating 15-second clips using a mirror effect on YouTube. And I'm getting a lot of traction with these videos. And thanks for reading the other day. I'd love for you to read something today if you have this moment to read. Okay, listen to this. These three cannot be separated, therefore intermingled they form the one. Its highest is not light, its lowest is not dark, welling up without interruption, one cannot name it. It returns again to non-existence. This is called the formless form, the objectless image. This is called the darkly chaotic. Walking towards it, one does not see its face. Following it, one does not see its back. If one holds fast to the Tao of antiquity in order to master
This
today's...
is called the formless form, the...
So that's how I'm doing this.
Your awareness there. Yes, sir.
One great koan, that's what we were before.
Yes, life is like one great koan. No, death is not the solution. It has no solution. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. You see, the thing is like this. This is what is hard for Westerners especially to understand. I said, if you understand the yang and the yin, you don't need to ask any further questions. And all you I Ching buffs ought to know this by now. What is not a component of Western common sense is that nothing is something. Now, that may sound a little contradictory, but I think I can explain it. We treat nothingness as if it were ineffective, as if it wasn't really important at all. And yet, when we look out at the night and we see all these stars in space, try and imagine what the heavens would look like if there weren't any space. Then obviously there wouldn't be any stars. I mean, you could think that they will all be jammed together in a lump. There are various objections to that. How would you see the edge of the lump? No, it was a lump, without space around it. Furthermore, we know when we investigate the constitution of matter physically, that at the atomic level, there's more space in something than there is anything else. Most of it is empty, and which led a physicist at the Argonne lab at the University of Chicago, who had become a little nutty. He was so impressed with the emptiness of matter that he went around in the most enormous padded slippers in case he should fall through the floor. So now what the point I'm making is this. If space is essential to solid, it's perfectly obvious then.
Okay, this is more Tao. Here we go. If one holds fast to the Tao of antiquity in order to master today's existence, one may know the ancient beginning. This means Tao's continuous thread. Those who in ancient times were competent as masters were one with the invisible forces of the hidden. They were deep, so that one cannot know them. Because one cannot know them, therefore one can only painfully describe their exterior.
Those who
Nothing is essential to something. If you can't have something without nothing, it means nothing is pretty powerful stuff. Because something comes out of it. Like that. It's a dogma of Western thought expressed in the Latin phrase ex nihilo nihil fit. Out of nothing comes nothing. But that's not so. Out of nothing comes something. Now you would say, well, if something comes out of nothing, there must be some kind of mystery inside nothing. It must have a secret structure of some kind. I mean, there must be sort of electrical goings on. This is the trouble they have about cosmology. How could this world generate? Could it just be out of free-floating hydrogen? No, it is a much simpler idea than that. It comes out of real solid nothing. It's so simple.
You've been listening to Alan Watts in On Being God, delivered in New York City in 1971. It's from our Philosophy and Society series, and to download this and other similar recordings, please visit...
Well, that's popular superstition. The real meaning of karma, the word in Sanskrit means simply doing. And if I say of an event it is your karma, it is saying it is your doing. So the exposition, a book which would expound karma, would be not so much a whodunit as a youdunit. But that seems fantastic. Now, therefore, what I propose we do is that we, instead of just ideologizing, we have a clinical experience. You know, in psychiatric school, medical school, it's very usual for a doctor to bring a patient out in front of the students and talk with the patient as a kind of demonstration. He says, I want you...
Okay, so I filmed 50 shorts on YouTube today. I have kind of figured out a way, Narges, to like put out a massive amount of content every day. And I just create these 15-second snippets. There's like no point to doing 60-second or 3 minutes. Just like, it's all about these short ones, high value information. So I'm using the Tao to do it. And I don't know, I think I found like a winning formula to mass hypnotize people. It's all about hypnosis, and it's really what you're saying, how you say it. And I found the Tao book to be like the perfect little tool to do this mass hypnosis on YouTube, this little psyop of joy and peace and love. That's right, Narges. We're going to make the world happy, one 15-second clip at a time, until the whole world is pacified in love.
To recognize the difference between a psychopath and a manic depressive or a schizophrenic or something, they don't know what all these things mean. And especially the schizophrenia. And so he has a dialogue with the patient right there.
Okay, this is more Tao. Here we go. Hesitating like one who crosses a river in winter, cautious like one who fears neighbors on all sides, reluctant like gas, dissolving like ice that is melting, simple like unworked matter, broad they were like the valley. Hesitating, impenetrable to the eye, they were like the turbid. Who can clear up the turbid little by little through stillness as they did? Who can create stillness little by little through duration as they did? Whosoever guards this Tao,
impenetrable to the
So let us suppose that I'm the patient, and you are the students and the doctors. And I suffer from what you would call the delusion that I'm God. And therefore, you might want to do something about me, or with me, or humor me, or ask me questions. And so I'm perfectly willing to submit to your examination and your treatment, and invite you to help yourselves.
When did you become God?
Now?
Will you marry me?
No. Yes.
God, you sleep on your stomach or your back?
Sleeping is like politics. One sleeps on the right side, and then when you're tired of that, you sleep on the left. When you're tired of that, you sleep on your back, and when you're tired of that, you sleep on your stomach. And it is thus that the world goes round.
If you were God now, what were you yesterday?
Now,
How do you become God?
you don't become God.
Am I also God?
Yes.
Are we then the same person?
No. Remember, 3 persons, but 1 God.
God, can you tell us a little about Satan?
Could I tell you a little bit about Satan? Yes. Although the matter is a little esoteric, but I told you all about it in the book of Job, where you will see that in the court of heaven, Satan is the district attorney. He is not, as Christians imagine, the enemy of heaven and the enemy of mankind. He's merely the person who sees the bad side of things and carries out the dirty work. And therefore, he saw Job and wondered whether Job really was as great a guy as he seemed to be, and suggested that God